Azhar Ilishad. I am head of growth at User Pilot, and today we have folks from Heap.
My name is Rawan Baltazar. I'm a solutions consultant for Heap, so I have a background in really understanding, what clients are specifically looking for as they evaluate an analytics solution, and then from there, as this relates, of course, to the webinar, figuring out how we can begin, to measure those success criteria and how to improve those success criteria as well. I'm really looking forward to this webinar today, and if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. We're excited to tackle those.
Yeah, so thank you for the intro, Rawan. I'm just asking people if folks are using any kind of analytics tool. Good news, there are people who are thinking about it, I've seen in rehearsal, so I'm really excited to hear what you're sharing today. Yeah, so this from now onwards, you're going to start and just take over the stage, and I'll just join in between. And also, if there's any question that comes in, we will take at the end. And if there's any question and if people can't hear us, I'll just jump in. We'll turn off my video so that everything is focused at you and at your session. And the last thing would be that we'll cover all the questions at the end. So these are the couple of house rules. Yeah. Cheers.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Perfect. Please let us know if you can't see anything, but the first slide here should be the agenda. So we already went over intros. What I'd also like to cover is who Heap is, what we do, and then how we differ in the analytics space. So Azhar just took a toll. It looks like some of you already have analytics in place. That's great. We'll talk about where Heap differs amongst the competition. And then more importantly, we'll talk about why retention matters. And then we'll hop into a quick demo. So the first slide I have here is just kind of going over what we call the status quo. So in the middle of this circle, you'll see a bunch of different analytics solutions, GA being probably the oldest and most popular. And then we also have a mixed panel amplitude segment. With these types of legacy analytics tools, typically the workflow that product marketing CX sees is they have a really high technical overhead. And so what that means is any time that you have a question, you're going to have to spec that event. From there, you're going to implement tracking code, wait for that to get QA'd, and then analyze and iterate. And keep in mind, all of this is happening with an engineering resource. So it's not something you can do on your own unless you're familiar with implementing tracking code. So most of our customers this whole life cycle takes them anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. It just really depends on the organization's bandwidth. And the time to insights and the delay is really causing problems for the organization as a whole. With Heap, we've taken a new approach to analytics. So essentially what we're doing is we're eliminating all of those different steps that I mentioned. So we have something called auto capture, which we built from the ground up. And essentially what that means is anytime you have a question about your data, you can create something called a virtual event. From there, you can analyze and iterate on that virtual event in a matter of seconds. So it really empowers any non-technical person to go in, point and click at a specific element on your site. Let's say, for example, it's a page, a call to action, a form submittal, etc. Define that virtual event, and then inside of your Heap instance, you can begin to start asking questions around the data. We're going to specifically focus this on retention, obviously, for today's webinar, and how we can help you understand how sticky a feature is and which customers are most likely at risk of churn. But really the main takeaway and where Heap differentiates itself in this space is eliminating those time to insights and having you go in, define these on your own and get the answers in real time. And this is the auto capture technology. So how does it work? It's really simple. Implementation is these 4 lines of JavaScript. So you could either install at the head tag of your site or through a third-party tag manager. And these 4 lines of JavaScript are going to begin doing all of that heavy lifting. And by heavy lifting, I mean collecting that clickstream data. Now you'll notice at the bottom there's some technical specs. I'm not going to go through every single one, but most customers ask me, is it agnostic with the framework we have? The short answer is yes. We are very much platform agnostic. And if you do have any questions, post-webinar, feel free to reach out to our team and we'll be happy to help. So now let's talk about the meat of this webinar, which is retention and why retention really matters. So the first slide that I want to go over are some growth metrics. So these metrics might look familiar to you. What we're looking at here are acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. So really, all of these metrics are very important and they really shape your funnel. So this funnel might be different based off of your vertical, but for the most part, all of these metrics will resonate with your organization. A lot of the focus within the life cycle is not necessarily on retention today. So why are there so many more important metrics that you see here on the screen? You'll notice that retention's in the middle. We don't focus, like I said, on retention in the beginning of the life cycle. And I'm going to dive into why it's important to actually focus on retention rather than just creating a bunch of different promotions and marketing content and marketing channels, blogs, etc., on acquisition. So retention solves your leaky funnel. Retention is about growth for your business. Retention solves your leaky funnel. If you don't retain the customers, your business will ultimately fail. It doesn't matter if sales and marketing is bringing you 1,000 new customers if you just aren't retaining them. So what we're looking at here is just a quick graph, and you'll notice that in the beginning of the year, we've had about 100 customers, and then towards the end, it's dropped down to about 57. So this is not a very good stat, obviously, and we don't want to see this across any organization. The reason why retention is so important is because you never really want to take a look at your retention flatten. So as you can see here, this graph is showing you a cohort of users, and it's portraying bad retention because over time you don't want to see that flatten, you want to see it grow. Good retention, though, on the other hand, in this graph is increasing, right? The stickiness of your customers going back and engaging with a specific product or feature. So ultimately, when you want to look to measure retention, you want to be able to see an increase, right? An uptick rather than a flat line. So measuring retention, why is that important? Oops, let's go back here. Measuring retention is important because ultimately you want to be able to retain those customers and expand, right? So when we're looking at measuring retention, we asked our customers, why is it so difficult? Why is it not a top of mind initiative? And a lot of our customers have told us it's not that it's not a top of mind initiative. It's just we're having trouble figuring out how to measure retention, what stats to look at, and also being able to interpret the results. So for the remainder of my time with you all today, what I want to walk you through is the Heap platform and show you how we set up our customers for success when they're thinking about retention. I'm going to cover the 3 points that I just mentioned. So how do we measure it? What results are we looking for? And how do we interpret the results? I'm going to go ahead and hop over to a demo environment. Once again, please let me know if you're not seeing my screen here. But what we're looking at first and foremost is the Heap technology. So as you can see here, it's going to be a black overlay that will load on a specific page. And the first approach to retention is ultimately understanding what it is you need to measure, right? So if you expect your customers to engage with a certain product or feature, go back and reuse it, you're going to have to first define that interaction so you can actually measure it in analysis. So this technology is called the Event Visualizer. It's our point-click tool. Going back to that original slide that I mentioned where Heap differentiates itself. The biggest differentiator here is normally, if you wanted to go in and define an interaction, you would tap an engineering resource and they would instrument tracking code, and then you would get an answer to that specific interaction. With Heap, we're allowing you to do it yourself. So as you can see here, if I move my cursor around, it'll allow me to hone in on specific areas on the site that I want to start defining. So this is our home page, just for simplicity's sake. If I wanted to point and click and see how many people are interacting with our customer stories button, all I have to do is click on that. And then on the right-hand side, you'll notice a definer box pop up. So what we see here is in the last week, we've had a little over 1,000 clicks. From there, what we're gonna do is we're just gonna hit next and give this event a name in plain English. So we can call it customer stories. We'll put it in a category, and this is important because as you have multiple folks, let's say from CX, marketing, product go in, Heap does have data governance. So you can actually store these virtual events in areas that will ultimately make sense for the broader team. So I can go ahead and put this in, let's say, the analysis. From there, I can hit define event, and my work here is done. So this is the first step, right, in the process is let's go ahead and begin to ask questions around the data. What do we need to define to understand how that's impacting retention across a specific feature or specific page? So let's go ahead and actually hop into the analysis now. This is the Heap UI. So what you see here is one of our modules. We're focused on retention. Everything on the left-hand side are additional areas where you can run analysis, but we won't get into that. And what I want to show you here is how we set this up, right? So this is going to be that first point that I mentioned within the slides. So ultimately what we want to see here is a start event and a return event. So if we expect our customers to go back and engage with something, we need to be able to see how often they're doing that. Now, to give you all just a quick background, this run query button is an event that I've defined. It's this guy right here within our product. I use that event visualizer tool, the point click tool that I just demoed. And all I needed to do was just select it from the drop down here and plug it in. So what I want to look at here is how often are our users going in, hitting run query, and then coming back and hitting run query again. So once again, this is important because it'll let me know how active are our customers actually engaging within our product. So if I scroll down here, you can see the users retained from hitting run query. The x-axis will show you the percentage, and then the y-axis will show you the time. So this is table stakes for Heap. This is something that we give all of our customers out of the box. It's standard. These are standard questions you should be asking. Now, where we begin to help you identify, is this a stat or is this a percentage that's good versus bad? How do we improve it? That's where I'm going to hit on the second bullet point, which is actually testing out some hypotheses. So this feature here, the group by feature, will allow you to test out some questions. So there's a ton of different ways that we can slice and dice this report. Right now, we're just looking at how often are our users going back and repeating hit run query. But what I want to test out and see if the retention improves is how many of those users who have, let's say, interacted with this event, is our suggested reports event, have actually retained higher versus those who haven't clicked on that feature. So we're just going to do a group by here. We're going to hit run query to adjust the results. And at the bottom here, we actually have a far more indicator of how a specific feature is impacting retention. So we can see in the blue, the group that has clicked on the suggested reports feature, and in red, the ones that haven't. So what this tells us is that feature actually improves retention, which is really great to see. And what it also tells our product team is, hey, this is something that's working. Let's make it more prominent because it clearly has an effect in the long haul. So we can go back and forth and test out a ton of different things. The value with measuring retention and specifically measuring, why retention is a certain way or what are some impacts of retention is having you optimize on the fly so you're able to actually improve that in the long haul. The last module I also want to share here is bringing in some metadata into the mix. So we looked at a specific cohort of users, right? Users that have clicked on a specific interaction, which was suggested reports. But let's say we actually want to see the customers, which customers are actually going in and actively coming back and hitting run query. So we can bring in Salesforce data. In this case, we're looking at account name. And at the bottom here, we can begin to see the breakdown of the multiple queries, right? The multiple accounts that have hit run query. So this is really important because now we have an indication of the accounts that are actively using this feature. Maybe we want to now take a look at the accounts that are not using this feature, right? If accounts are not using a feature we expect them to, it's obviously a red flag. We want to make sure that our retention scale doesn't flatten and that it constantly spikes. So what we want to do here is activate these insights. So what I want to do now is just show you the final module where I think this plays a really big role with passing off to something like a user pilot, is creating a segment of users that have, let's say, not completed a specific action or have not completed a certain sequence and need either a guide or a tooltip to get them to the finish line. So this is how we'll be able to improve that retention with the assistance, right, of, let's say, a user pilot. So what I've effectively done here is I've created a segment. Instead of taking a look at the users that have clicked run query, I actually want to take a look at the number of users who haven't hit run query, because once again, for us and for our business, that's not a good sign. That means they're not actually engaging within our product. And what I want to add here is account name. So now what I've effectively done is taken a look at all of the accounts that have not clicked run query in the past 7 days. And from there, I can send this segment right to a user pilot, for example, to get them to the finish line, right? If we notice that they are not completing this action, or maybe they're struggling at a certain point in the funnel, let's go ahead and actually send them a message that will resonate with them with the backing of analytics that we know that these accounts and exclusively these accounts need the assistance. So this is really important because ultimately you never want to show a message to a specific customer that doesn't resonate with them, right? It might do you more harm than good. With Heap, and really where Heap fits in, with something like a user pilot, is giving you that data to make accurate, driven decisions. So knowing exactly who to pinpoint, when to pinpoint them, and with what messaging. So I know I explained a lot here, but really the main takeaway with retention is being able to test out on the fly what features are resonating. From there, beginning to ask questions on top of those features. For example, are users who are engaging with X retained higher than those who aren't? And once you begin to understand what's working and what's not working against specific cohorts, that's where you can begin to activate these segments downstream. So I'm going to take a quick pause here and stop sharing my screen, hop over to the user pilot section, and just see if there's any questions, or if Azar, I think if you wanted to go ahead and show how this would play with user pilot, this might be a good time as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Folks, please feel free to ask questions right away. We will just look at it. I will take 5 more minutes to explain how we think about retention and a bit more theory as well. So I just want to share that so that you guys can learn a little bit how we think about retention in our journey, with our users basically. So this is like, can you all see my presentation? Let me know. Okay. So basically, the way we think about retention is that, we think about granular user adoption journey. So like where exactly the users are. And so there is a first week a retention where a user comes as a new user and then starts trialing and then starts becoming an activated user. We can take example of user pilot for now. For example, at user pilot, anybody who comes into and try the application has to install a Chrome extension. Or let's say if somebody is using a social media tool, the first thing they have to do is connect their social media accounts. So that's like the stage where they go from new to trial, right? And once they do that step, there are more steps there in there. So for example, you can think about in user pilot, again, we want the users to actually create flows and publish them. And after publishing, install a JavaScript as well. A JavaScript is important because you want to trial it in your application. So that's like the activation for us. Similarly, in a social media tool, what will happen is that you can think about that social media tool wants you to start scheduling the tweets and the posts. And if they start tweeting more than 3 or 4 schedules, then they are activated. So this is a first week retention. And then we think about like paid retention. So I know a lot of user pilot users and a lot of my customers users as well, they pay for an account, but they still are a bit lazy paid. So they haven't made enough efforts to completely set them up completely correctly so that they achieve the goals they want to achieve. In our case, what happens is that they have run, for example, 2 or 3 flows, which they want to show as a one use case, but they have not done second or third use case that we want to show them. So these are like lazy paid. And then they become basic user when they actually have tried 2 or 3 big features of user pilot. Similarly, in social media, for example, if you start analyzing some tweets, that would be the stage where they move from scheduling stuff to actually analyzing stuff. So we think about that specific journey as well in this user adoption journey map. So that's one. And I want to talk a little bit more about the aha and activation moment that I talked about in here. The aha is something which we think about is that when a user understands, when a user actually knows what the platform does. So for Facebook, it's like, okay, it's a social media tool. It's a social media network. And there's an activation moment when they really understand what's the value in the platform. In this case, it would be, I have 7 friends on Facebook. I can follow them and I can talk to them and I can reach out to them. So these are 2 different moments. One is about what it does, and another is how can it help me to do a better job. So we actually think that in the first week retention, you should just focus on key action that you want the user to do. In our case, we want the user to install the Chrome extension. So that's how we think about it. In Heap's case, it would be probably also using the run query, right? So that also helps them to understand how many users are actually trying that application and trying that run query. But we also think about that you should also set up something like a checklist on top with some kind of gamification. If there's no gamification, that's also fine, because checklist itself is a gamification factor. So we think that if you have certain tasks for the user, the first week retention actually improves as well. That's just one use case. We've seen that a company like Box, after adding a checklist, they were able to increase 32% of the trial run. So that's just a simple stat for you. And the last thing that I want to really stress is that what Heap is doing and what User Pilot is doing, it's all about asking better questions and then changing the habits of the users, because they have certain habits and they want to just run it in a way that actually change the habits what user is currently doing. So in this case, I was copy pasting. I have installed HubSpot. I don't know how many of you know HubSpot, but I was trying HubSpot. I was a free user, and I was copy pasting a couple of emails to send it them quickly. And as soon as I was copy pasting those specific emails, HubSpot showed me that I can actually send it as a template, and it could be a sequence as well. And that's changing my habit. That gives me the aha moment. Oh, okay, you know what? I can contextually change user behavior when a user does something or does not do something. So that's our philosophy. I just want to stop for a while if you understand my use case a little bit better. So I can just show quickly how user pilot works and how can you do that. Yeah. I'm just waiting 1 minute just to see if anybody has any question. Cool. So yeah, so this is a demo account for user pilot, and I already have something running. So I want to quickly show you a pro checklist. This is how we think in terms of retention. So when the user has done basic checklist, you can actually, what you do is like you can run a pro checklist. It's all about motivating user to show them what they have already done, and then moving them to the next stage of their actual features that you want to show them. So in our case, it would be like, for example, showing them automate with quality flow. By the way, this is just a demo account. It's not actually user pilot. It's just the checklist that is running user pilot. We also have some kind of a advanced feature that we want the user to use, for such as native tooltips or add help widget button. So these are like already there, but we don't want them to use it like even if they are paid user, because this is like something a pro user will be using. So like a checklist like this with a pro user checklist really helps, and that also reduces the cognitive load that the user has to do a lot of stuff. So that's just one example. The other example that I can actually tell you guys is something that I believe in, which is again contextual help. This is also about as Raman said it, like, a habit has, you want to change that habit of the user, that user will actually find value. So what you do is like, you actually take the user account data and then show them some kind of a slide out that actually says, I just did a little bit more personalization by saying, did you know that your ex-colleague had like, say 5 hours by using this specific feature at your company called Heap. So I just used Heap as an example. And then you show them where exactly that is. And then you change their behavior by making them click on it. So when you click on it, then it stops. And this is something that is really powerful to change people's habit by already showing them some kind of social proof, as well as telling them the benefit, how it will change their lives. So these are the two key examples that I can think of for now. That would help you to increase retention. Now I would just stop and let the floor open if somebody has any questions for us, so we can dive deeper into it. Great. Rawan, can you see the questions? Oh, I can hear you, yeah. Yeah, now I can hear you.
So Anish is asking which retention is difficult, product-based or non-product-based. Anish, do you mind giving me a quick example of kind of what's running through your mind? And I can maybe give you an accurate answer.
Yeah, I'm also unclear on what is a non-product based retention. Maybe it's outside of product, perhaps?
If that's the case, let's just do that just in case he doesn't have or she doesn't have time to respond. If it's outside of, let's say, the product team and its marketing, it could be a blog. It could be really just about anything. It's whatever you expect your customers to go back and engage with. So it's not a matter of what's difficult. What we always recommend to customers is let's figure out what is the action, what is the repeat action you want to measure, right? So if it's a page view, if it's watching a video, if it's clicking on a specific feature, etc. Let's first define that as a virtual event, right? And then from there, let's begin to analyze and see how often are they going back to that page, or how often are they going to that blog. And then from there, we can take a look at the results and begin to test out some second and third level questions to see, does going to another page actually impact them going back to a blog? I hope that answers your question.
Rawan, you're maybe it's me, I don't know. There's a lag between, guys, if you see there's a lag between, just let us know in the chat. But I think Anish got this, so thank you for that. Elise is asking, do you encourage users to run experiment based on the adoption data you gather?
We do, if I understand that question correctly, let me reread it. Rawan, do you encourage users to run? When we're talking about experiments, do you mean like A/B tests, Elise? Yeah. So absolutely. We don't do any A/B testing in-house personally, but we do partner with BWO, Optimizely, etc. And that group by feature that I showed you, where you can test out and see, oh, are users, interacting with this? Are they interacting with that? We can bring in that experiment. So to build on that question, you can actually understand which variation is causing a higher retention against that specific set of users. Would Heap help? So this is a question from Grace. Would Heap help with highlighting frustration points? Absolutely. So we looked at the retention module, but what we could also take a look at is another module of ours called the paths, and they play hand in hand, Grace. So the idea would be for you to understand how are users making their way into a specific goal or a specific action. So most of our customers actually don't know where those frustration points are. So the path module will be able to show you those unknown unknowns. All right. So this is from Anish, will artificial intelligence overtake analytic tools? I think it's definitely something we're all thinking about. I know our product team has that on their roadmap. So we've hired a ton of data scientists to join our team. So the short answer is, I don't know if overtake is necessarily the right word, but it's definitely something we're all thinking about, especially when it comes to alerting you and letting you know, hey, X amount of customers have dipped in your funnel conversion. Maybe it's something you want to take action on, etc.
Cool. I have a question. We've been also thinking about retention for a while. Have you thought about, like, when you were showing that if somebody use a run query, then there is some kind of a you see that the people who have responded with run query have higher retention. Can you actually do like comparison between two different features and see which one has a higher retention? Because that would actually help with user pilot. Like that would help user to understand, hey, I should actually have 4 tasks in the checklist because these are have the higher retention. So I want to understand, is there a comparison between run query and some other feature, and you say, okay, you know what, I can see that people who are using X feature has higher retention than people who are using Y feature.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. So you can definitely plot it out, however you'd like, because like you said, then you kind of have a clear-cut understanding of, are they retaining higher with X, or are they retaining higher with Y? But absolutely, off the top of my head, the most common one we frequently see is with e-commerce, for example, where users clients want to see how often users are going back and adding to cart. So that's something that we frequently see the retention module being used for. But there's really a ton of different ways for you to kind of slice and dice it. And then just like you said, with those insights, then okay, if I want to, use this in user pilot and effectively target these folks, I actually know the analytics or the data behind the decision.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. It's a very good question by Asim, actually. How to bifurcate the KPIs on product-based into B2C, B2B, B2B. Yeah, think of a company like Box. They have B2C model, they have B2B model, and they have also B2E model as well.
And from Brad, if you don't know what actions correlate with retention, can you help us identify where to start? Absolutely. We have a team here. They're called our professional services team, as well as an account management team. And really the goal is to just understand your business, right? And understand what are some things that are important to you as an organization. And from there, we can work together and test out and see, are these features or are these pages specific actions that you want to correlate to retention? So it'll be an open conversation between both parties.
So did we just miss Seem's question, by the way? I can't. Yeah, no, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, what was his question? It must have got lost.
Yeah, it's about KPIs based on B2B, B2C, and B2E.
Oh, I see. So we focus on mostly, KPIs for B2B. With that said, I think it's the same answer as I gave Brad. So ultimately, when it comes to your organization, it really just depends on what are the things we're looking to measure, having an open conversation there. Short answer is we don't have, I guess a set standard for each. It's just a matter of where are you at today and where do we need to improve on.
Oh, that's a tough question. Somebody bought for how to ensure retention of the customer after the transaction, 2 years.
So how to ensure retention of customers after the transaction, a product which is bought once in 2 years. Interesting question. It's a little tough. I think Tarun, I'm just rereading it. Go ahead.
My thoughts are that I think you need to see that what are the, so if it's bought after every 2 years means that whatever they've bought, they have to really completely implement it. And for example, if I'm using Heap, right, and there's a 2-year contract, I should be able to in the first year completely set up the entire Heap system, because I know that you guys also don't ask people to completely set it up and see the value, because it takes time to actually import all the events and all the paths and see it. What I think is that in 2 years, you need to see how often the user coming is, what is their health score data, how many events they've already used, how many people in the company have actually used the application, how many are not. Is the CSM actually reaching out to them after every second month or third month to knowing that they're adopting the product enough? So I think it's a customer success responsibility to make sure that they are happy and they're adopting the features and whatever the feature releases you're doing, and if they're adopting that as well. And that would actually make sure that your retention will stay higher with those customers in those 2 years, and might just like bump up the next 2-year contract.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Then Anish is asking, I'm not sure if this is for either of us, but what percentage of your revenue comes from retaining clients? I don't have an exact stat, but what I can tell you is that obviously we make money off of our customers going back and, renewing, right? So if we're not able to renew our customers, then that's not a good sign. We're actually spending money like most businesses, bringing in new customers as well. So the whole goal is to, once you acquire a customer, to keep them satisfied, delighted. And just like Azar said, that's through customer success, constantly checking in. And then from there, being able to, make sure that we're upselling, et cetera.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see if somebody has any question. I was also thinking about another question that I had about with Heap. So what do you guys think about in the setup of Heap? Does it take, do you advise people to implement it directly? Do you guys advise people to take over time, or first focus on one part of the retention, first part of the pirate metrics, like talk about activation only, and then see the value, and then make sure the other events are adopted, or you just tell them, hey, just go directly in?
Yeah, and Azar, I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. Do you mind repeating the end of that?
Yeah, I was saying that, do you advise your customers to adopt all the events in the pirate metrics, or just one of them at a time?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's a matter of adopting all of them, of course, but prioritizing retention. What we've noticed, and especially me, a lot of times on calls as I'm, getting to know the clients and just hearing their top of mind initiatives, it's very, very, it's not brought up early on that retention is important, which is really interesting. And I think it needs to be more of a point of a conversation, just because at the end of the day, like, we can try to get, users to go on a specific product page or marketing page, or we can try to get them to engage with this new feature you spent money on and you shipped and released. But ultimately, if you don't actually see in the long haul, long-term success, right, against these customers, then what's the point? We can help you bring in 1,000 different customers, but if you're not doing a good job of having them come back and engage with a specific product and feature, then what's the point? So I know that was long-winded, but I guess the short answer would be prioritize retention. Take a look at all of them, but bring it up early and often in the conversation.
Makes sense. Good answer. Tarun is not happy. Tarun, feel free to reach out to me or Rawan personally. And I'm happy to look at your specific use case. I'm not sure if that would help unless we understand the context behind it. So we'll just move on. I'll send my email, so you can just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll copy Rawan in the email. And if you have to answer, we will answer that. So Anish is asking another question. Not related to retention, but how do you handle escalated issues of customers? Yeah,
I can start first, and Azar, if you want to chime in too. So I lightly mentioned we have a professional services team as well as a CX team. Our customers, of course, as any organization, they're our top priority. We want to make sure they're delighted and satisfied at all times. But we are very open to taking customer feedback. So one thing Heap does on a quarterly, if not monthly basis, is ask for feedback, and we'll constantly hold meetings to see, okay, of this cohort of users that's maybe not engaging with a certain feature, and we know this through our tool, let's proactively now reach out and get to understand, is it not placed in the right area? Is it difficult to understand? Do you need a tooltip? Do you need a little bit more description there, etc.? So whenever we have, I guess, any customer issues, those are definitely brought to the forefront. And we want to make sure that we constantly improve, right, if there's things that customers are struggling with. Hopefully that answers your question, Anish.
So with our case, we actually track everything with the escalated questions, and they are like priority. And so it's just in like our Jira, Airtable, and whenever it's solved, we actually take care of it and tell them exactly how long will it take. I don't know how, like, this is the basic support process, according to me, and so we track it through Airtable. That's how we do it. But Anish is asking, is there any escalation metrics or any type of inbuilt mechanism or tool to capture escalation? So we do that with our feedback platform. Like, we have a feedback survey application and user pilot. So we do that by asking if there is any specific feedback and then track it in Airtable as well. But that's how we do it. I don't know if I answered Asim's question or not, but go ahead if you have any insights there. Oh, that's a good question.
So Anish, what do you think, is it the technical knowledge of a product or good communication skills is required for retention? Which factor is more important? Interesting question. Let me just reread that. What do you think? I think it's both. It's important to know, your products, the ins and outs, where they're struggling, etc., what to optimize for. But I also think, if I understand this question correctly, good communication in the sense of like following up, right? And actually like, yeah. So making sure that these customers are delighted. I do think it's a little bit of both, right? You could have all the technical knowledge around a product, but if you don't take action, then what's the point, right? These people do want to be heard. So it is definitely communicating.
No, he's saying actually convincing skills, not communication skills.
Convincing skills, or good convincing skills is more required. Okay, it's interesting. So
what I think about, if I understood it correctly, I don't know the context of Anish that much. You definitely need to know about your technical part of your product. Like in user pilot, when I don't know answer, like it's such a dev focused tool. So is Heap. Sometimes you can't answer the question, so you have to bring a dev in there to actually answer the question. But about convincing, I can only tell you one thing: as long as that customer or user, you keep telling them how your product benefits them in a certain way and they keep finding value, you can convince them. So I would rather go with technical, but if you can make it clearer to them that this will help them and it will add value, will save time, will make them money, will reduce cost, save money. So all of these factors, if you can tell them, convincing is much easier in that case. Yeah, it's totally true. Feedback is a bit different than escalation point. What I thought about escalation point, we usually do with chat tool. As I said, we use a chat tool to track the whole journey of the user, what the point, and then come back to them. But what we do with feedback is that we do ask them generic open questions to know where they're still struggling proactively, and then before even this problem comes in, we can fix this. That's what I meant. Cool. So we'll wait like a minute or two if folks have any questions, and end the session. In the meanwhile, yeah, sure. Asim, I'll share it to you later as well. So from my side, I'm really, for me, it was an eye-opening webinar in terms of how you think in Heap, and what queries or questions you can run. You need to have questions that you need to solve, and then run Heap queries. That was very interesting. We are definitely Heap customer, so I'd highly recommend Heap as well. Yeah, thank you so much for coming in, Rawan, spending time and doing so much of back and forth before the webinar as well. So really appreciate it. Hope people found it useful as well. And thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the time. Hope you all enjoyed it as well.
Indeed. Indeed. Cheers. Anish, I'll send you an email and we can cover that right after. Yeah. Cheers. Bye-bye.